Here we are. All right, so welcome everybody. Sorry about canceling this Tuesday and for my tardiness today. I got held up on the phone, but I am really excited to talk to everybody. Of course, we'd have to have a snazoo, our first one of 2022. Otherwise, it just wouldn't be us, right? Technology woes. So, but we are rolling here today, and we're gonna keep going. I'm just gonna like I said, I'm running a little bit late today, so I'm just going to pull up my questions here. Today we are going to talk about taking care of our pets in the cold weather, which seems like a really good idea to talk about. We're getting some pretty cold days, and lots of things can go wrong when it's cold, just like lots of things can go wrong when it's hot. So give me 1 second here, and we're going to pull up these questions. Here we go. All right, so let me make that small, and then I'll bring this back up here. All right. Whoops. Oh, I'm so sorry, everyone. All right, so here we go. So, like I said, we're going to be talking about taking care of our pets during cold weather. It's getting colder outside. Different things can happen when it's cold, and it's good to be prepared for that. I do want to, again, apologize for my tardiness tonight and then also having to cancel on Tuesday. And I want to do a shout out to everybody before I forget and just thank everyone for attending, for submitting your questions, and then also for everyone here at the clinic that allow me to do these things with you guys, because I do I love talking to you. I love answering all your questions, and I think this is a great opportunity for all of that. So we'll just kind of dive into it. Okay, I did get a couple of questions ahead of time. One of the big questions we get is kind of how cold is too cold for pets. So the exact temperature is going to vary, okay, depending on a lot of factors. The majority of pets have, fur coats, and then also breeds. So your shepherds and things like that have what's referred to as a double coat. So when you feel them, a lot of your northern breeds will have that. So they have kind of a rougher, longer outer coat that does act as a little bit of a waterproofing barrier, and then they have a thicker, softer inner coat, or almost a down on the inside there, and that keeps them really nice and warm. The way pets stay warm is they do, the fancy word for it is piloerect, right? So they make their hair stand up on end. And what that does is that allows them to trap warm air next to their body. And in those double-coated breeds, that outer one is going to be a windbreaker and a waterproofing, and that allows that inner one to hold all that warm air right up next to the body and for them to stay dry. So it works really well as a system. And so that's pretty sweet when it's working at its highest. Now, not all breeds have that, okay? So other breeds, for example, English Springers, Cavalier King Charles, Golden Retrievers, those types of breeds. So they have a single coat. So if you pet them, they're nice, they're soft, they're silky, but they have a thinner coat, okay? The coat is going to, it's like wearing a light fog jacket, so to speak, in the wintertime. Okay, so it's not that insulating. It's a little bit insulating, and it will help them stay warm. And if they're running around like crazy and being crazy dogs, they're not going to really feel cold. However, the cold is going to seep in. It's not very waterproofing at all. And so when it snows, it's going to melt on them, and then they're going to get wet. And that's probably the biggest thing. So how cold is too cold? Okay, so as a general rule of thumb, I guess I can just say anything below freezing, you do want to use some caution. If you have a northern breed or a dog with a double coat, you're probably fine, okay? What you want to watch with them in particular is their weak spot, which is in between their toes, in between their paw pads. That is where pets sweat. That is also where they have the thinnest coat there, and then they can get little ice balls up against their feet, okay, because it's not insulated. So when they walk, they will melt the snow under their feet, and it'll clump up and make these little ice balls, and it can be kind of painful. And if they're going to have any type of frostbite issue or anything like that, that's probably where it's going to be. Your other breeds that don't have that type of a cold weather coat, you know, anything below freezing, you're just going to want to watch. They're going to get cold. They're going to build up ice balls faster. They're going to have more issues. And you can usually tell. Dogs will run around a lot more, or they'll shiver or anything. And they sell a lot of coats for dogs of all shapes and sizes. They look like little mini horse blankets, and or they look like little evening coats with their like padded collars and stuff. You can get really fancy ones, and they can look really cute. So if you have a dog that doesn't have a double coat and you want to be spending an extended period outside, you just get them a jacket, get them a doggy coat. So it works really well. All right, so it's kind of a complicated answer to a somewhat simple sounding question, but it really just kind of does depend on your individual dog, how cold too cold is. Does cold weather affect dogs and cats? Well, yes, it does. It affects dogs and cats in a lot of the same ways that it would affect us. So they can get cold, essentially. So we already went in and talked in great detail about different kind of coats and things like that. We didn't talk a whole lot about cats, so I'll touch a little bit more with this question on how kind of cats deal with the cold. So cats, there's not as much variation with cats as there is with dogs as far as coat types, unless you have a specialty breed. Most of those breeds, if you have one of those, are quite expensive, so the vast majority of them are kept inside in temperature controlled areas. So with this lecture, I'm going to focus a little bit more on our outdoor cats. So we have a lot of cats that go in and out. We also have a lot of cats that are barn cats or garage cats and things like that. So these cats, they do build themselves up a winter coat. Some of them you'll feel will be fluffier than others, but in general, most cats are domestic short hair or domestic long hair. Okay, they're pretty well insulated. Where are their weak spots? Well, their weak spots are their ear tips, their tail, the end of their nose, and their little toe beans. So I talked about with dogs how they don't have a whole lot of insulation around their paws, even our double-coated northern breeds, and so they are going to melt the snow when they walk. They are going to build ice balls when they walk, and that can be really painful and that can be really cold in those areas. So what we worry about more with our cats is we actually worry about those areas getting frostbitten. And the way that you would avoid that is by giving them a place that they can go to that's going to warm and dry is going to be the big thing. Frostbite we see most often happen in our extremities, so ear tips, tail tips, little toe beans. The nose not so much because they usually tuck that in really well and keep it protected, but it can get really cold and you can get some peeling and things like that on that if it is exposed a little bit too long. They can get hypothermic and get to the point where it is life threatening. Usually that's going to happen in our kittens. They just don't generate enough body heat, or in our adult cats that do get wet. Once you're wet, you kind of lose that whole insulating factor. So we talked about how they have that coat and they pyroelect and they hold that warm air up next to their body, keeping themselves warm. Well, if your hair coat's wet, you're not able to do that, and that wind is going to whip right through, and you're going to be more prone to just losing body heat left and right. No matter what you do, you can shiver all you want, but you're still going to get way too cold. Okay. And so that's kind of the issue that we run into with our pets that get wet and do have to stay outside. They need that place they can go to that's wind-free, that's warm, that's dry, and they can just kind of dry out their hair coat, and then they're safe to go back out. They also kind of need that option to come in and just warm up those parts of their body that are going to be more exposed to the elements and allow them to warm up before they get any type of cold weather damage or anything like that. So it kind of, does cold weather affect cats and dogs? I would say absolutely. The extent it's going to affect your dog, again, is going to depend more on their breed. As far as how it affects your cats, again, most of them can adapt pretty well to it. It's just a matter of making sure they have that option for clean and warm and dry is going to be the big thing. And so indoor, outdoor cats are allowed to go inside, not as big of a deal. Barn kitties, you just want to make sure that they have access inside that. You don't want to close it up all the way. They need a way to go in and out. The same with the garage. Okay. So yes, absolutely, it does affect them. The degree in which it affects them can vary on the individual animal. What are some winter health risks? Okay, so I kind of touched on a couple of those already, honestly, with answering the other questions. So the main ones that we worry about are hypothermia that I talked about, frostbite that I touched on with our cats. The other two that I'll talk about is dehydration. So a lot of people don't think about the fact that in the wintertime your air is a lot drier. So you actually need to drink more during the wintertime than you do in the summer. But oftentimes we don't think about that. We don't necessarily feel as thirsty because we're not sweating. Now our pets will drink more if it's offered, but it has to be liquid water. Okay, so that's the one thing we really need to keep in mind is that when it gets really cold, they need to drink more water, but sometimes that water isn't as available because it keeps freezing on them. Also, there might be a little bit cold, so if that water is maybe not frozen, but it's got ice chunks floating in it, it might not be as appealing for them to drink. So this is where heated water bowls come into play. If you can't do a heated water bowl, you just don't have access to an outlet, something you can do is you can just fill the water bowl with hot water and you can set it out there. It'll take a whole lot longer to freeze, and then you can swap it out depending how cold it is outside. You can swap it out 2-3 times a day, and that will give them the option to come and get a nice drink of water. That'll be nice and warm, help warm them up from the inside, then also keep them hydrated. So with the air having less moisture in it, just simply breathing is going to dehydrate you a lot more than what you would necessarily think. And then for our pets who are kept inside, we also need to think about the air quality there as well. So a lot of us around here heat with wood burners or coal burners or corn burners, and they tend to be extremely drying. There's also a little bit of a smoke factor that goes along with those, and that smoke is again just going to pull more moisture out of the overall system while they're sleeping or anything. One of the big things we see, it's not exactly life-threatening, but we do see a lot more dandruff in the wintertime than we do in the summertime. Again, just kind of playing back to this lack of moisture. Dry skin in people is a lot more common in the wintertime. People usually put on a lot more lotions and everything like that. Unfortunately, lotions don't work that well in our animal species. Main problem is a lot of times they just lick it off. The other problem seems to be that they just don't absorb it as well as we do. I think it has to do with that hair coat issue. If you lather enough on that you're going to be moistening that skin, you're just going to be lathering and slathering that hair to the point where it's wet, and then that's actually going to make them colder, and then they'll have more issues that way. So I don't recommend using a lot of moisturizer or anything directly on the skin. What we want to do to try to help that skin out is we want to treat it from the inside out. So fish oils, flaxseed oils, those types of things. An old breeder trick is to throw a raw egg on top of the food. That works pretty well. And then even something just as simple as putting a humidifier next to your pet's favorite sleeping spot actually does help. It seems like it wouldn't necessarily make that much of a difference, but it does actually help to keep that skin quite a bit moist. Just give them an area where there's just a little bit more moisture in the air. It can help out quite a lot. Kind of talking about the skin, that's a great sequela into the other thing we see a lot of times more with cold weather is just basically skin injuries. So the skin gets dried out, it gets brittle, it gets more prone to injury, and so little bumps and scrapes and things like that, they can actually cause a wound. So if you're running around and it's warm out and you scrape up against a rock, you might get a little abrasion. In the wintertime, you scrape up against the same rock, it just seems to cut a little bit deeper. And I think it's a combination of the rock itself is honestly a little bit harder in the wintertime because there's the moisture in it that froze, and then also the skin itself is weaker, and so it tends to go a little bit big. So what we're talking about, sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. What we're kind of talking about is just watching that and keeping an eye on skin issues. Wounds to the skin also take longer to heal in the wintertime because the body vasoconstricts, or it decreases the amount of blood supply out to your extremities in the wintertime. It's your body's way of helping to keep your overall more warm. That is why you get a little bit more prone to frostbite with that. But along with that, even if you're not getting frostbite, you tend to have less blood flow to those extremities. And so just a simple cut or a wound is going to take a lot longer to heal in the wintertime than it will in the summertime because there's just less blood flow. You need that blood flow in order to bring all of those regenerative factors to the site to allow for healing. So one of the ways you can speed up a lot of times the healing process in our pets that are kept outside in the cold weather is to simply put them in a heated area. So they don't need to worry about generating the heat themselves, and they can have better blood flow to their extremities in general. They can get better blood flow to that specific area. Kind of sequela that's becoming more popular is laser therapy, and the basic premise behind laser therapy is to increase that blood flow on a surface area or a deeper tissue level in order to bring those healing factors, to bring those anti-inflammatory factors, to bring all of that to that area. So one of the really simple things we can do is we can just stick them in a heated area, which will allow their body to naturally do that when they have a wound in the wintertime, and it can be quite helpful to speed up your healing process. So that's something to kind of keep in mind there. What are ways I can protect my pet during winter? How do I keep my cats and dogs warm? So ways you can protect your pet in the wintertime, it really just comes back to those basics. We need a place where we can come and get out of the weather. We need a place that is dry, we need a place that is warm, and we need to have access to it for when we get cold, okay? Now there's lots of different ways you can keep them warm, okay? If you have a single coated breed and you know you're gonna be spending a long time outside, we already talked about getting a doggy blanket for your pet, or doggy coat, and you can get as fancy with it as you like, and that's going to help keep them warm because it's going to keep that moisture off of them. It's going to keep the snow from melting right on their skin, keep that evaporation away. And they also sell booties that you can put their feet in, and that'll keep the ice balls from forming. And they use that a lot in Iditarod for the dogs that are racing through the snow, because as I mentioned, when the foot goes through, it's going to melt the snow, the ice balls are going to form. And the way we prevent that is by putting essentially shoes on your dog. And so that does help out a lot. So if you know you're going to be out for a while, even if there really isn't any snow on the ground, you might consider putting booties on if it's really cold out. So if we get down to those low double digits or single digit days, booties is going to help keep their feet warmer in general, because that cold ground isn't going to seep all that heat out from the bottom of their paw pads, which is a weak spot for our pets. So that's definitely something that can help out that you might not think of. So it's not always ice balls that we're going for, which is keeping them warm. Sometimes it is literally just that cold ground sucking the heat right out of that body. Okay, so coats and booties keep them warm. The biggest thing is their sleeping area. So if they can come inside your house and warm up whenever they like, it's no big deal. If you have a dog that is outside, you need a dog box that is either A, small enough that their own body heat from laying in it is going to get it warm. So that's the whole premise behind those little igloo dog houses that they sell. They were popular for a really while. Or those smaller wooden dog boxes. Basically the dog can go in there, curl up, and they're going to get it warm just by their own body heat. Or you can get a heated dog house, okay? Or you can give them a place to sleep where they can bury themselves in some straw, maybe inside a barn where there's other animal body heat, keeping the barn temperature a little bit higher up. So we see that a lot with our dogs that like to spend time. They're outside farm dogs. They sleep in the cow barn at night. Cows generate a lot of heat. So if you close the doors up a little bit, leave enough space for the dog to go in, they can go in there and they can get warm with all the other farm animals. Okay, so enough body heat in that space is going to get them nice and warm. And then giving them something they can bury themselves in is also really nice as well. Helps with that insulation. Straw is very insulating. Sawdust is also very insulating. So our main things that we usually use for bedding in barns and areas like that for outside animals also helps as well. So even if you don't have a barn, if you just have some outside dogs or some outside cats, keep that in mind. Throw some straw in the dog box. Throw some sawdust in the dog box. Those media are actually going to keep them warmer than a quilt because they're able to really push it around themselves and bury themselves into it. One thing you can do is a really neat experiment. It's really simple. Is you can just take an ice cube out of the freezer, and I want you to put it into 3 different mediums, right? So I want you to take one, I want you to put it in a wooden box buried in some sawdust. I want you to take another one, put it in a wooden box buried in some straw. And I want you to take the last one, I want you to wrap like a washcloth or a towel or like a blankie around it, and I want you to put it in a wooden box. And I want you to see which one melts first. So I can guarantee you the one wrapped up in the cloth is going to melt first, and then probably the straw, and then sawdust is probably going to be last, as far as the melting of those ice cubes though. So it's kind of a neat little thing. Hey, how insulating is it? And I know we're looking at it from the opposite end that way, like how long does it stay cold, but the principle will apply either way. You know, you get those insulated cups, keep your drink hot or cold for so long, because if it's insulated, it'll maintain the temperature, and that's what we need. Okay. One of the nice things about mammals is we do generate that heat ourselves. So if we have something that's insulated around us, we should be able to make it warm as long as it doesn't get that heat sucked away, either through moisture or wind or something like that. Okay. So that's kind of a little bit into keeping them warm. So if we're going out and you know they're going to be with you for a long time, we got coats, we got booties. If they're just living outside, then we need appropriate sleeping arrangements, and those types of things, along with free access to it. Okay, keeping them that warm water source is also going to help keep them warm as well. And on really cold days, again, we're talking, you know, really low double digits or single digit days. If you have an outside animal, honestly, heating up their food a little bit, it just helps them warm up on the inside. I'm sure you can appreciate that as well. You come inside from being outside when it's really cold, and just that hot meal just feels so good. So don't be afraid to go ahead and throw your dog's food in the microwave for a little bit. Just stir it up so you don't get hot spots. But most of the time they really like that as well. So that can help out a lot too with their GI tract sometimes. Alright, is hydration important for pets during the cold months? So I already touched on this, and absolutely 100% yes. We do worry actually more about dehydration, or at least I worry more about dehydration in the cold months than I do in the warm months, because people just don't think about the fact that, well, yeah, they have a water dish, but it froze after about 2 hours of being outside. So your pet just simply had no access to water. Most people are a little bit more in tune with making sure we've got nice water during the summer months when they're all hot and sweaty and drinking a gallon of water. But in the winter time, especially when it's cold, we don't really feel like going outside. We might not realize how quickly that bowl's freezing, or necessarily how much of it they're really drinking right now, because they're out there in that really dry air constantly. So they actually need a little bit more water than what you would think. Although they're not running around outside, they're still going to need quite a bit of water. So definitely want to make sure they got access to warm water throughout, or at least unfrozen water throughout the whole winter. I actually do get asked this quite a bit. Is it okay to groom my pet during the winter? Yeah, it's absolutely okay to groom your pet. The biggest things is keep in mind how you're keeping your pet, and you can kind of base it off of that. So if most of our pets who need grooms for basic sanitary needs. So a lot of your breeds that need groomed are your doodles, which is a poodle mix, and there's a bunch of those. You also have your poodles themselves, shih tzus, those types of things. So those dogs really need to get groomed for basic hygiene, particularly around the face and the eyes, and also around their private area. Are they going to be maybe slightly colder when they go outside? Potentially, but that's going to be better for them than having a bunch of mats. And all of those breeds that I talked about have a single layer hair coat. So their hair coat, again, at its best at times, is like a nice fall jacket. So it's not really providing them all that much warmth, and if they're going to be out for an extended period of time, you're going to want to buy them a coat anyway. So please get your dog groomed and just buy them a coat. And when they get cold, let them come inside. If you have an outside dog who's solely an outside dog and you want to get him groomed in the wintertime because maybe there's some mats or things like that, you can definitely work around that. I still think you should groom your pet for their basic hygiene, because that's why we groom most of our pets. And then put a coat on them. Give them a doggy blanket. Give them a nice warm heated dog box to go into. Those types of things. So we want to make sure they have access to all these things anyway. So I don't see any reason in not grooming your pet just because it's cold outside, because we just need to take some other precautions to make sure that they're warm. Okay, we do need to be realistic about it. If you are not going to get them a dog blanket, if they don't have access to anything heated, if they're normally a big, giant, shaggy dog that was meant to live outside, and then in the summertime you always shave them completely gone, well, maybe don't shave them totally gone unless you're willing to give them a coat, you're willing to give them a heated, dry place to go to, all of those things. So if you're not able to to provide them adequate with that, then no, you don't want to take off their coat. However, with that being said, if their coat is matted and clamped down and covered in feces or urine, then honestly, that's not good for them either. And when that coat gets like that, it's also not very insulating. So you're going to want to shave it off and give them something else. Their pet's going to be healthier and happier for sure. So I would say, yes, we definitely want to groom and everything else. So, all right. And then we did get a comment from Carol and Jim, and thanking us for taking care of Parker. I'm really happy that he's doing awesome. I'm happy to hear about that. So thanks for the shout out, guys. That's really sweet. We appreciate that. We like to hear when our patients are doing well. So that actually kind of wraps up all the questions that I was given ahead of time for taking care of our pets during the cold months. Trying to think other things that we'll see that we necessarily didn't touch on. I think we hit most of the high points with it all. Honestly, the biggest thing is just access to that clean, dry place, making sure that they can do that when they need to. And most pets will seek out proper shelter. The only ones that really don't, again, are our young puppies. They don't realize when they're too cold. Our young kittens, they don't seem to really be able to generate enough heat to begin with. So if you have a mama barn cat that's still having kittens in January and February, if you don't believe in letting nature take its course, then you're probably going to want to catch those kittens and make sure that mama gets in somewhere that's clean and dry. And then if you're out with your puppy and they're potty trained enough, you don't necessarily have to go out with them every time. You are probably going to want to watch that clock and just make sure they don't stay out there too long, because puppies will run out from the house and start playing a little bit too much and then get too cold to make it all the way back. So maybe just if you're in that puppy kind of stage with your dog, set a timer when you turn them out, and then just, okay, they've been out there 15 minutes. That's kind of long for a puppy at this time of the year. Let's just check on him and make sure he's okay. And a lot of that will also, again, have to do with exactly which breed of dog you have. But as a general rule of thumb, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Just check on your puppy. Make sure they're at least still in your yard. They're still happy and running around and doing well. So, but yeah, I think that's going to be the big questions we get, big things we get. Most of the time, even if your pet does get frostbite, it usually isn't life-threatening by the time we would see it. It is quite painful while the tissue itself is dying, but we've had a lot of animals who've lost part of a tail or ear tips or even a toe, and they do okay. So it'll fall off and it'll be all right, but we're going to want to make sure if we double check that they have the proper housing, then we shouldn't have to worry about that too much, unless for some reason they got wet, and then we might need to take some other precautions and just get them dried off or bring them inside at least for a short term until they dry. All right, so with that, again, I just want to apologize for having to reschedule till today. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and I want to thank everyone here at the clinic for helping us out to make this possible. I am actually headed off to a veterinary conference starting tomorrow, so I will be gone and out of the office for a while, but I will still be available by phone in case something happens. Anyone has a question for me, feel free to call us here at the clinic. Dr. Gardner and Dr. Klein are going to hold the fort down for me, so we still will be open for regular hours. And then I just really appreciate all the help that they give us as well to allow us to go and do all of this so that we can help serve you guys better and keep everything at the clinic here as up to date as possible. With that, I will go ahead and just let everybody know that heading into this year, we are planning on remodeling the clinic. Again, just trying to get it up to date. Hopefully we'll be starting construction later on in this year. It might take us a little while, but that should be starting to roll out here maybe towards the summertime. And we'll see, they'll start in the basement, and then when that's rolling and doing good, then we'll run our operation out of the basement while they fix up the upside for us. So should be fun. So I'll try to keep you guys posted with that as we move through the year. We're still in the very beginning stages, kind of finalizing blueprints and all that good stuff. But when we get more dates, I'll be sure to keep you guys posted. Along with that, keeping you posted on stuff, we do have a special going on for cold weather gear for our pets on our online store. It includes coats and booties and heated water bowls and all that good stuff that we talked about today. But I think it should be a good time, and in the end, we're all going to be better for it. So again, thank you for everybody, and we will keep you posted with updates, exciting stuff coming on the clinic coming up this year. And if there's anything really cool that I learned, I will definitely be sharing it with you next month. So hope you all have a wonderful night, and thanks.